thank you so much for the introduction. And I don't know if any of you were listening in, but it was such a pleasant surprise for me. I occasionally do these kinds of presentations with human service courses or with sociology courses. I've never had the opportunity to present to a course that was specifically focused on the issue of homelessness. And kind of going through some of the readings that you guys have already done, it's really exciting to kind of maybe have like a critical discussion with you about some of the challenges that we face in this role. What are the biggest barriers for clients in accessing services? What it's like to be a direct service provider, if that's something that, you know, some of you may be considering getting involved. Obviously, you probably came to this class with a passion towards the issue of homelessness, and if not through this class, developed a passion in regards to the issue because it is such a persistent issue. Kind of looking at some of the other amazing speakers that you had, I wanted to maybe fill in the gaps. I'll start by just talking a little bit about what my organization is and what we do, what my role is. So PATH has been an organization since the 80s. It has shifted in that time. The service model for addressing homelessness through, you know, the late 80s and the early 90s was a transitional model. So it was really focused on becoming housing ready. And then I would say since the early 2000s, late 90s, there was definitely a push towards making a more ideological housing first focus. So that's kind of establishing that really the biggest issue this person is experiencing right now is housing insecurity. And as soon as we are able to get them safely housed, we can address any other issues that they might have, whether, you know, it's substance abuse, mental health. And I know you guys probably discussed in previous classes, a lot of those symptoms are a result of the experience of homelessness. So a lot of people coming off the street that maybe are dealing with some of those issues, they're a lot of times connected to the trauma that they've experienced from being unhoused. So our organization as it stands right now, we're one of the biggest organizations in California. We have offices in Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, Long Beach, San Diego, San Jose, Orange County, and we provide rapid rehousing assistance. Has anybody talked to you guys like about the different assistance kind of?
We've done it a little bit, Rebecca, but it'd be great if you just want to sort of remind us of the different types.
Yeah, absolutely. So we primarily provide rapid rehousing assistance. That is the primary intervention nationally for addressing homelessness. And that is time-limited rental assistance. It's typically between 6 and 9 months. But organizations try as best as possible to be flexible so that we can ensure the client's able to sustain that housing moving forward. And then our organization also provides permanent supportive housing. So permanent supportive housing is where the client is receiving an ongoing subsidy, so their rent will be income-based. Lastly, we do provide some emergency shelter. But I would say primarily we work on getting people into permanent housing. So one thing I was really excited about, I noticed that you guys read the Osborne article about eligibility. And so as a housing specialist, we don't determine who gets connected to what resource, whether it's permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. That's done through the coordinated entry system, which is super complicated. I'm gonna throw some acronyms at you guys, so just bear with me. But it's a blind matching system. Something that we experience day to day in direct client services is a lot of misunderstanding within the community about why they're matched to different programs or why they're not eligible for like a higher, more permanent level of care. So I know you talked a little bit about my background, and I've had an opportunity to work with a diverse population, with families, with TAY, with domestic violence, with formerly incarcerated, with, you know, people who have underlying medical conditions. And unfortunately, there's like a finite amount of permanent supportive housing. So the majority of people that I'm working with, I'm coordinating to get them into market rate units. So one of our biggest challenges is affordability. Possibly want to give you guys an example. A lot of clients I work with now are on fixed incomes. So they're on disability. Disability is typically about $1,000 a month. They'll get connected sometimes to temporary rental assistance, but that means as a housing specialist, I'm working to identify a unit that the client can sustain on $1,000 a month income in the county of San Diego. So I'm sure some of you are renters here. I don't know how much you're paying for your rent, but there's really not a lot of housing options for these clients. A lot of times, unfortunately, we're pushing their 70 to 80% income threshold to where they're spending 70 to 80% of their income towards their rent. And that obviously, as you can imagine, whether there's any kind of unexpected expense, it's putting the client at risk for recidivism into homelessness in the future. So as an organization, we've really kind of pushed towards building more affordable housing because for a lot of these clients, the rapid rehousing is a temporary solution, and we're seeing like a high number of recidivism in that area. I would say for families, they're able to maintain on rapid rehousing a little bit more effectively. Another thing I wanted to talk about was kind of related to some of the reading that you guys did and how some of these programs kind of still, unfortunately, we're experiencing like residential segregation. There's a lot of effort in the community to address that. The Section 8, up until recently, landlords actually had the ability to discriminate against any kind of rental assistance or ongoing subsidy. Actually, recently, this last year, they made that illegal, but we really still in our day-to-day jobs see a lot of discrimination against programs going on. Because you can call a landlord and ask if they'll take Section 8 or ask if they'll work with rental assistance. And they may say yes, but then they'll up the credit requirements or they'll up the income requirements, and they'll just create another barrier to accessing housing. So something good that San Diego did was address that kind of discrimination. And then we're also one of the few counties in the United States that does small area fair market rent. So what that means is that we base, when you go to rent something with any kind of rental assistance or subsidy, there's a max that we're allowed to pay as a provider so that someone can't go and get like a $3,200 loft. And so it's called rent reasonable. Most counties just base their rent reasonableness off of an average for the entire county, which in turn basically makes certain communities within the county completely inaccessible for people receiving subsidies or rental assistance. So, you know, higher end communities, communities with better school, higher opportunity areas. Typically, you're not seeing a lot of voucher use or rental assistance use in those communities. San Diego has tried to be proactive on that by making zip code specific rent reasonable ranges to where if you're able to, if you're connected to rental assistance, and you want to live in La Jolla, you have like a larger budget to utilize that assistance. But, you know, historically, I'm sure we've had conversations about redlining and the lack of ability to develop generational wealth and how that's affected people in housing and all that good stuff. But we're still really seeing those rental assistance programs and vouchers being utilized mainly in low income areas. So yeah, I said a lot. I don't know if maybe it would be helpful for me to talk about kind of what the day-to-day of my job is, or if you guys had any specific questions.
Yeah, Rebecca, Ahmad, before we get to questions, because I know we have a lot. Yeah, I think either your day to day and then just a tiny bit about your path, like your path to path, and
Sure.
how it is you got in this profession. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start kind of like with my path to path. So I worked in restaurants for a long time, and I got really into food access. And so I started and developed a food bank in Orange County, and worked really closely with Cal State Fullerton in like a community garden development project to create like more access to healthy foods and food deserts. There's a really cool program in the Fullerton area called UACRE that also works with people that are on like, people that are in students that are in juvenile hall. It connects them to like food service jobs and also with like training with agriculture. So I partnered with that program to do on-site community gardens at food banks and like local elementary schools in that area. I did that for about a year, and one of the most persistent questions I was constantly, clients were constantly asking me about was related to housing. So although we were able to connect clients to food, most of their issues stemmed from basically inaffordability, not being able to maintain their rent. That was where most of the anxiety was coming from. And I realized I was completely not knowledgeable about housing resources. I felt really helpless to help a lot of these clients. People would show up to the food bank with like 3-day pay or quits. We really wouldn't know where to send them. So I did a shift. I wanted to kind of focus my efforts more towards understanding housing policy and getting involved on the housing end. And so I started working for an organization called Families Forward. They were one of the primary family rapid rehousing service providers in Orange County. And I worked there as a housing specialist. It was a really, really meaningful experience for me because, again, I know you guys have probably heard this so much through this class, but your conception of like what homelessness looks like is so different than the reality. You know, I've worked with, you know, people that were dentists in Mexico fleeing domestic violence and not able to, you know, get their same employment started over here, or, you know, people that were transitioning that experienced discrimination, you know, based on being transgender, both in housing and their home. A lot of single mothers where if you're a single mother of, you know, 2 or 3 children, the reality is housing is completely out of reach unless you have like a high paid, you know, job. So it really runs the gamut. Mostly you're just seeing people that don't have access to like a safety support system. And something I really, really want to emphasize that is devastating about this field is that there just are not enough resources out there to serve everybody. So I know you'll often hear people talk about like those people just don't want to get help. But it's really not that. And I also really want to speak because I know you're talking to a direct service provider. I myself have not experienced homelessness, and I really like want to raise up the voices of the people who do, but just trying to navigate services is a full-time job. Like it's, you know, Monday through Friday, you're on the phone, you're trying to contact people, you're trying to get connected, you're trying to get help. This has been noted as like an issue within homeless service to address is like accessibility. So a lot of counties have made a concerted effort to kind of create like one door that people go through to access those resources. But a lot of times that still creates a lot of confusions because clients don't understand it's a blind matching system that doesn't guarantee assistance. So they'll kind of wait around for a long time thinking like, am I going to get connected? Am I not? And as service providers, we're not able or cannot say whether they do or not. Worked there for a while, transitioned from that position into a supportive service position, which I loved, building and developing a supportive service program for affordable housing with an emphasis on pathways to home ownership for low-income families. And that was a really exciting project for me because there's nothing more like it's really ensuring like upward mobility and stability when you can allow people access to home ownership. So we worked really closely with Habitat for Humanity. We worked really closely with the different cities within the county to develop like incentive programs for down payments. And then we worked really closely with like financial literacy, Neighborhood Works, other organizations to get clients ready for home ownership, which was so exciting. So that was when I was working with families. And then this last year, working with PATH, I really wanted the opportunity to understand better some of the challenges of our single adult population. So this whole last year, I've worked with a program called the Whole Person Wellness Program, and that's for some of the highest utilizers of medical services. So these are clients that are going to the emergency room 2-3 times a month. They have incredibly high needs. Most of them would not be able to maintain any level of employment. So these are our clients really with the biggest barriers to housing. And something that's been incredibly eye-opening to me through this experience is, and something I had never worked with before. Normally I'm working with, little property management companies, mom and pop landlords, but working with like SROs and ILFs. And there's a tremendous amount of exploitation of this community within some of those residential communities. So does anybody know what an SRO is? No? Okay. So, and I hope I haven't said too many acronyms, but it's a single room occupancy unit. And those are typically what we utilize for clients that have really restricted income. But these are units that are oftentimes about 80 square feet. So this is not that different from the size of a prison cell. A twin bed, a sink, and they can be expensive and they can charge a lot because they're one of the few housing options in San Diego County that doesn't require a lot of rental criteria. So you know this when you apply for an apartment, they're checking your credit, they're checking your references, they're checking your income. They can be really picky because it's such a desirable place to live. There's such a high demand for rentals. Don't even get me started on Airbnbs because there's like 11,000 short-term rental units in the county of San Diego that really, I personally believe, undermine affordability. But so most of our clients are looking at units like those, and it's honestly really difficult conversations to get a client on board to spend such a large percentage of their income, on that type of housing. That's kind of the reality of it.
And 2 quick follow-ups. So on average, for your clients, an SRO would cost how much a month? And then what's an ILF? I haven't heard of ILF.
Thank you so much. And if I say any more acronyms, please, please, please just be like, Rebecca, we don't know what that means. So an ILF is an independent living facility. So what it is somebody will, own or rent a house, and then they will rent out beds in the house. And so we're even seeing a lot of where people aren't even the property owners. They're actually just taking a rental. So they'll rent like a 5-bedroom house in Vista for $2,500 a month. And then they'll put 2 people in each room and they'll charge $500 per bed or $600 per bed. And so if you do the math, like it's really passive income. A lot of people are catching on to that. So that's an independent living facility. And then SRO single room occupancy prices range. The very cheapest one in San Diego is $550. And then they go up. Some of them are about $1,000. Some of them have little kitchenettes, or they'll have like a toilet or a small shower in the unit, but the vast majority of them are shared bath, shared kitchen, if there's a kitchen at all. So another thing to consider with a lot of these communities, again, is like access to like healthy food. a lot of these people are on disability, they have COPD, they have diabetes, they have like a lot of underlying conditions, and then they have no access to cooking. So really, I know all this seems like really, really dismal, and that's why there's such a big push to build and create affordable housing that is dignified, that people are going to thrive in, that, you know, can be subsidized in a way to where people are spending a you know, humane and reasonable amount of their income towards their housing. I'm so all over the place, but I hope this is making sense.
No, this is great. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Um,
So my day to day, if you want me to kind of jump into that, is so there's a lot of different direct service positions. I've, like I said, have been working in housing for a while, and you know, toyed with the idea of doing like an MSW. But for me, I really am like a systems thinker, and it just didn't, for me, feel like an effective use of my skills. So case managers, typically case managers, clinicians, every organization is usually going to provide a client with two different types of supported services. I'd say lately, because rapid rehousing is such a focus, there's usually a housing team that's working with the client, and then there's a supportive service team that's working with the client. Supportive service team just works hand in hand with the client on, you know, health, wellness, connecting to resources, you know, if they need substance abuse, mental health, access to, you know, our case managers at our organization are amazing. They'll sit all day at a DMV to make sure a client gets their license. So they really go above and beyond. We also have peer support specialists within our organization that have lived experience, which is really, really fantastic. A lot of organizations don't have that. And we rely on them to relate to clients, and kind of walk clients through the process, because even like going from shelter or the street into an apartment doesn't seem traumatic, but for a lot of people it really is, because it's pulling them out of their network. I've worked with clients that have been homeless for a larger percentage of their life than they weren't, and so you're really asking them to like rethink how they live their day-to-day life, and it's incredibly isolating. So peer support specialists are really a fantastic resource for that. And then my team, myself as a housing specialist, I would say my job is like a 50-50 split between working with clients really closely on kind of figuring out what it is they're looking for housing wise, what it is oftentimes they're willing to compromise on. A lot of times, to get clients to take that first step from homelessness to housing, you have to create like a pathway for them, because that first step sometimes isn't what they expected. You know, if you've been homeless for 15 years, the last time you rented bedrooms or, you know, one bedroom apartments were $600 or $700. So to come back into it and be like, what, they're $1,500? Like, how is that possible? So I really like to encourage clients to come up with like a long-term plan, where it's like, this is your first place, you're going to be here 6 months, you're going to be here a year, you're going to build that positive rental history that you don't have, and you're going to spend that time getting on a Section 8 wait list, getting on affordable housing wait lists, you know, accomplishing some of those other goals that you have. So typically I'm doing a housing intake, and I'm doing weekly follow-ups with my client on housing search, submitting applications. Most of my clients don't have emails. They're, you know, filling out or like having access to a computer or something along those lines to complete an application is really difficult. They don't have a lot of the information that they need to complete an application. So sometimes we're really leveraging partnerships that we've created with property management companies that are willing to work with us. And then I'd say the other half of my time is spent doing that outreach, raising awareness, talking to landlords, talking to the communities, negotiating with landlords. So we do a lot of negotiation with landlords about lowering rents. It's hard. We don't have a ton of leverage, but we are really able to talk about double security deposits, about them always having access to the housing team as a resource to troubleshoot tenancy issues, things of that nature. So yeah, it's honestly, I cannot tell you what a wild ride it is because I never know what my day, it's kind of crazy for me to think that I could put aside an hour like uninterrupted to like talk to you guys because I know I'm gonna like sit back and like I'm gonna look at my phone and it's gonna be crazy. But the situations that clients experience once they move into housing, it's not over. That's really just the beginning, especially for our jobs, because we're getting calls from landlords at all hours, whether it's like a noise violation, a disturbance, the client may not know how to operate some of their appliances, they may cause damage to the unit, and so we're always trying to mediate those conflicts. And I really want, it's not that every client that goes into housing struggles with housing stability. More so there's just those one-off circumstances where, it is a really difficult transition for a client. And then a lot of my job is just making sure that we're going to be able to maintain that connection to that landlord.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing. It sounds like very meaningful but stressful work.
Oh no.
Well, it does. It's a lot. It's a lot for you to hold at the end of the day. I just, yeah.
So one thing I'll say in regards to the work is, I've been doing this for a long time. It's hard to imagine doing anything else because it is really meaningful, and it's really important to have people in this field this is why I am so grateful that classes like this exist to kind of destigmatize like what homelessness is. Because it's really important to have people in this field that understand some of those barriers and understand that it is such a systemic issue and treat clients with dignity, because they're really, it's difficult for clients to access those resources as well. There's a lot of turnover in this field. Clients sometimes will have, multiple supportive service staff or what have you. It's hard for them to build connections with their supportive service staff. So yeah, it's having people that understand and have a larger idea of some of the issues that contribute to homelessness, I feel like can be so impactful in this field.